Hey guys, Aaron Dorr here with the Missouri Firearms Coalition, joined again today with State Senator Bill Eigel. Bill, you're leading the fight in Jeff City to help repeal or get rid of these red flag gun seizures, make them illegal here in Missouri. But most recently, you authored a great big letter loudly condemning the DOJ's attack on SAPA, Judge Wimes' opinion saying that SAPA was unconstitutional, and urging the Attorney General to stand up and fight back to defend Missouri's SAPA law. You had a lot of support in your caucus on this. Why'd you write that letter?
Well, I think it's important to defend the Second Amendment. That's why. And we said we invested a lot of political capital a couple of years ago in the Second Amendment preservation to make sure that the federal government couldn't come into Missouri and start grabbing guns. And so now that we have this rogue liberal judge out there that wants to throw it out, well, that hasn't changed our commitment to the fight. So I found out this morning there's actually a 14th senator that's now signed that, or excuse me, a 15th senator that signed that letter now. Senator Jason Bean down in Southeast Missouri.
Okay.
Of the Second Amendment Preservation Act. So every day we get more support, and it's a battle we're going to continue to fight.
Well, the list right now that I've got, which is dated from, I think it's 2 days ago, just for those who are watching right now, of course, you're the lead author of the letter, Senator Eigle, but then you have Denny Hoskins, Rick Bratton, Mike Moon, Holly Rader, Jill Carter, Curtis Trent, Ben Brown, Andrew Koenig, Mary Elizabeth Coleman, Nick Schroer, Travis Fitzwater, Carla Esslinger, and Rusty Black. And now you said you've added Jason Bean to it. So this is a pretty big list. It's a pretty strong statement of where your caucus stands on gun rights right now.
Absolutely. And a lot of the names on there, of course, are the usual suspects when it comes to gun rights.
Yeah.
But we're also seeing beyond just the usual suspects. I mean, you've got some names on there that we don't typically see on letters.
Indeed.
That's an indication that the Republican Missouri Senate caucus is taking this very seriously. Like I said, it took a lot of horsepower to get this over the finish line. And we're not going to turn back the will of the entire state legislature because of one rogue liberal judge. So we're going to keep fighting, and we want the Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, to know we've got his back.
So gun owners have been fighting for a long time to expand gun rights in Missouri and, of course, across the country. But we got constitutional carry, stand your ground law. That needs an upgrade, but we got that done back in 2016. We've got castle doctrine expansion. We've got lifetime carry permits. A lot of great things have been done. But to my way of thinking, SAPA is 100x more important than those, because SAPA is not just about guns. It's about the 10th Amendment and the Second Amendment. And we have a rogue tyrant in the White House these days, and this president does not believe the Constitution applies to him. He thinks he can just, if he gets angry because he can't pass a bill through the House, he grabs his tyranny pen, as we call it, signs an executive order, and simply declares things illegal. And what SAPA has done, I think, is reminded the states that we have an absolute right as states to say, you know what, we're just not going to help you do this. It's a peaceful non-compliance. And so it's a gun bill, but it's also much more about reminding the red states that this is our sovereign right. Do you see it that way too, as a much larger issue than simply about the Second Amendment?
I 100% see it that way. We could probably have a really long conversation about all the things the federal government is doing beyond just infringing on our Second Amendment rights. But it all comes back to the federal apparatus in Washington, D.C. is trying to run our lives from the nation's capital. It starts with the Second Amendment, right? Because we know that Joe Biden and his cronies up there are going to go after the Second Amendment, but they're also trying to use federal money, which they're borrowing and printing in mass, to try to incentivize the states to do bad things. That was the genesis behind Senate Bill 10.
Yes.
Prohibits local areas from taking dollars in order to create these so-called local red flag databases and go after law-abiding citizens from owning firearms. So we have to be vigilant on a number of different fronts. And the pushback, the struggle now as a state, it's not just Missouri, it's a lot of other states, is to not just protect the people's rights, but to protect them from a federal government in Washington, D.C. that is entirely out of control.
Yeah, it seems to be a new fight in some ways. Not that it was not predictable, but most people who live in red America are there because they want to be left alone. They want to be in a state that values freedom, where the government just leaves them the heck alone, pro-gun and lots of other things. And so if you're in red America right now, most states have accomplished a good chunk of that. But your point, I think, is 100% correct, that was then, but this is now. And now we have a president And today's radical left, they're not content to leave us alone in red America. Their goal is to take all of our money, take all of our freedom, and tell us how we have to live our lives. So it seems like what you said is accurate. This is a different dynamic than we had, a generation ago, trying to keep our states free. It's a different player now coming from the White House.
Yeah, it is. But you know what? This is the path that the Democratic Party has been on for a generation.
Yes.
Big government. They are about taking people's rights, and they are not going to miss any opportunity to do so. So for us back in the States right now with a Democratic president, and quite frankly, it could be Joe Biden, it could be Barack Obama, it could be pretty much anybody in the Democratic National Party that was in charge of that town. They would be after our rights, and it is up to the state legislatures and state governors, Republican state governors, to stand in the gap and defend our rights. And if we don't do that, then it's going to be the law-abiding citizens who are lawfully owning firearms that are going to pay the price.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the word rights a couple times there. I had A.G. Bailey on our show here just a couple of days ago, and we asked him about the Second Amendment, about SAPA, and he said it in very, very clear terms that our rights come from God. And if I'm putting some words in his mouth here, perhaps, but that his job is to defend those as the AG. Your job, of course, as a state senator, is to make laws and defend our freedoms. Do you have that same conviction that our rights stem from God first and foremost?
100%. Our rights come from God, and actually the only proper role of government is to defend those rights. So, a lot of folks, it's amazing to me, if you ask 100 politicians what the proper role of government is, you're probably different answer. But for me, it's a question that should be asked of every elected official. It's defend your rights. If you're not defending your rights, then among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And by the way, be careful of that last one, because a lot of our friends on the left like to twist that last one. But if you're not our life and our property, why do we have government in the first place? Why are we giving up our individualism as a society to entrust a little bit in a limited government to protect those rights? So we've got one party in this country that has gone completely off the rails. They are all about absorbing your rights, trying to tell you that rights come from government instead of from God. No, you were born with those rights. We are elected. I'm elected by the people in Eastern St. Charles County to defend those rights. And I tell you what, the Attorney General, as you know, he's under a lot of scrutiny right now. Go through an upcoming election cycle, and right now he's hitting it out of the park. So good on him. What I'm trying to do right now is to let him know that he's going to have backup in the Missouri State Senate, in the Missouri Legislature, when he has to go out on Front Street and take the slings and arrows that are going to come his way from folks in D.C., from folks right here in the state of Missouri. I want him to know we've got his back.
I couldn't agree more with that. Liberal media outlets across the state, and frankly, right now across America, are cheering. They're so overjoyed. They're somehow thinking that this was a kill shot when Judge Wimes gave his opinion attacking SAPA. It was well, that's it. Case closed. But I was there in oral arguments in Kansas City last July, and it was obvious from the minute that the gavel dropped that Judge Wimes, who is an Obama-appointed federal judge, it's overtly hostile to the idea of SAPA, to the idea of state sovereignty, the Second Amendment, 10th Amendment. So we were never surprised when this judge issued this opinion. In fact, in many ways, this plays into our plan, which is to elevate the SAPA issue to higher and higher courts and show red America, this is how you fight back. The Missouri playbook is what you do in your states. So I wasn't surprised by this at all. Were you surprised when this liberal judge gave his opinion saying that SAPA was unconstitutional?
No, not surprised at all. And I think you're right, Aaron. That was part of the plan. This was part of the process. And you're right, when it gets elevated to the Eighth Circuit, we expect a different outcome. And if it has to go further than that, we'll continue to expect positive outcomes. Missouri has been a leader on this particular issue. I suspect that we're going to continue to be a leader on the issue of protecting gun rights. And you know what? I embrace it. And there's no single liberal woke judge out there that's going to change my mind or turn back the will of 6 million Missourians that actually have a good understanding of what our rights are and where they come from.
Yeah, I think for anybody who has a sense of malaise right now, you have to understand this is the best time in our lifetime to elevate issues like this to the Supreme Court. We have never had in my lifetime a more favorable court than we have today. Last year's Bruin case was a 6-3 seismic victory for the Second Amendment. And as Judge Napolitano said last week on a big podcast here in Missouri, he said this Supreme Court is itching for a chance to expand federalism And SAPA is a great vehicle with which to do that. So this is the first step in this process, in our opinion, not the end. This is the lowest tier in the federal court structure. Now it goes to the 8th. If we lose there, it goes to the Supreme Court. Part of me wants to lose. Part of me wants to lose, Bill, and see this matter get referred higher, but we'll wait and see. Yeah, one question for you. Judge Wimes said in his opinion that SAPA was clearly unconstitutional because it was a supremacy clause violation. Now, I think we all know what he's trying to say by that. He pretty much means that the feds don't like it, so it's bad. Right. But the reality behind supremacy issues is that SAPA didn't touch that, because SAPA did not limit what the feds could do in Missouri. It said that they cannot force us to help them do it. Is that how you still see it right now?
That is absolutely how I still see it. And, I wonder if respectfully, has the judge even read the Constitution? Does he know how our system of government works? Or did he walk into that courtroom with an agenda that he was going to throw that out because he has a leftist agenda of gun grabbing? I think it's probably the latter. And, we've run into these kind of roadblocks before. We've run into these kind of woke liberal judges before. That's okay. We're undeterred. I'm with you. And when you talk about the possibility of losing at the 8th Circuit, just Supreme Court, you know what, Aaron? Unfortunately, we've got the facts on our side. So another loss is less and less likely the higher up we go. So it's we'll keep an eye on that. But regardless of what the 8th Circuit says, our engagement, our willingness to defend our Second Amendment rights, whether it's SAPA or a variety of other bills that, as you know, we have moving through the legislature right now, we're going to stay on it.
Talk to us a minute as a state senator about how common it is to have legislation that becomes law challenged in court. Some people seem to think that, well, this is just the death knell of our gun rights in Missouri because we went to court and we had this opinion and we lost. But isn't it true that when you do major expansions of freedom in any issue cluster in the state, it's almost a guarantee you're going to have some leftist organization, or in this case, the DOJ, try and stop you in court? How common is this?
Well, it's increasingly common because the left knows that there are judges, just like the judge in this case out there, that will rule in their favor regardless of what the facts say. So they know, especially with supermajority of Republicans in Jefferson City that are willing to expand freedoms, they know that their best avenue of holding back that tide is to go through the court system. And, the court system in Missouri is on a different page than the legislature and oftentimes the governor's office. So this is very common. We've seen this before. Anytime there's big legislation, could be on the Second Amendment, could be on a variety of things. Anytime, as you said, there's an expansion of freedom, there's going to be a challenge from the left, knowing that they have judges in place in Missouri that are going to make these kind of outrageous rulings. So that's okay. We're undeterred. This is normal. This is the process. We're going to keep going.
Last question for you. I was doing an interview last week with the Wall Street Journal, and they asked me, they said, Missouri was the first state to do this type of SAPA law, this expansive with the civil penalties. She said Missouri is one of the first states to get back in the stand your ground law fight after the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin debacle in Florida. There's a 5-year kind of gap there where no one wanted to touch stand your ground law. She's like, why? She asked me, she says, why is Missouri always at the forefront of the fight for gun rights? Why is it always coming out of Missouri? I gave her my answer. I'm curious what your thought is on that. Why is Missouri always spearheading the fight for freedom when it comes to gun rights in particular?
Well, I tell you, if you go back to if you recall, Aaron, Missouri used to be a very blue state. This was back in the 1980s, 1990s. And as Missouri became a red state, it was primarily on two issues. The first was that we have a lot of folks in the state that are also pro-life. But secondly, we have a lot of folks in this state that value their firearm rights. And as you saw Missouri transfer from a blue state to a very red state, it was primarily on the backs of those two issues, because previously, where we had a lot of Democrats in this state, they found that their desire to lawfully own firearms was not going to be supported by the Democratic Party. And so we saw vast changeovers in the rural areas and some of the suburban areas where folks realized, hey, there's no place for me in the Democratic Party that doesn't value any of my freedoms anymore. So we saw a major turnover in the color of the state. We're now a big red state. And so we've been able to kind of use that impetus to make a lot of progress on those two big issues. So I think that we'll continue to be a leader across the country. I think that's great for the state of Missouri. I wish we could lead on other issues as well as we've led on the life issue. and the Second Amendment issue, but I expect that we're going to continue to be strong in the state of Missouri.
Couldn't agree more with that. Senator Bill Eigel, thank you so much for your time and for leading the fight for gun rights. Here's a screenshot here for those who are watching of your recent cover letter calling on AG Bailey to fight for SAPA. You're leading that charge on the inside. He's going to lead that charge in the courtroom. Thank you for your time as always.
You bet. Thanks, Aaron. Have a great day.
You too.